good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I am once again back with some more Dawnless days, bits and bobs, content. Bit more informatic this time, less practical. I'm going to try and blast through every single faction that we will see in the Dawnless Days mod. This video is going to encompass both the standard factions, so there's 9 of them, and then there's another 19 factions that will come into this through the All Factions Enabled submod, which is actually available through the Dawnless Days launcher that you can get through the Discord, etc. Coming in at spot number 1, wasting no time, without further ado, faction number 1, Dale. One of 2 Northman factions that are available in the base game, the other one being Rohan, which we'll touch on briefly in a moment. Alright, so just to give you a general gist of how I'm actually going to break this down. There's going to be 6 factors that are kind of leading into each faction that I'm going to aim to cover as quickly as possible. Those 6 factions are going to be the leaders and generals, the starting characters essentially that come with each faction, faction strengths, the weaknesses, the nearby threats, and the starting difficulty. And then along with that I'm going to do an overall ranking of where I'd put them. With Dale, the 2 faction leaders that we have, King Bran, who is your faction leader, looking pretty dope.
Too jazzy?
They are a little too jazzy, yes.
Obviously both faction leaders for Dale are elite archers, and King Bard II is Bran's son. For their faction strengths, they have strong mid-tier infantry and elite archers, as I kind of mentioned before, excellent late game units, and they're geographically positioned right next to Erebor. Gives them very sturdy allies, especially if you can kind of team up with Thranduil in woods to the west as well.
See how far they get. You think I give a dead dog for your threats, you pointy-eared princess?
There is some good economy there, some good trade potential, as you can see from the map. There is a lot of ground there to cover, and I think in times of peace, which unfortunately is not what Dale's done out with, you could really get established there, get some great trade relationships going, and get a lot of money as a result. Apparently they have fantastic late game units. Having a look on the skirmish, they do tend to have a lot of good potential there. The weaknesses of Dale as a faction, they are very vulnerable early game. Here, and even down here you have enemies as Dale. So here, and here, there is threats encroaching on your borders pretty much straight away.
You are cooked!
You have some friends at the top of Mirkwood, and you obviously have them to your north, but southern Mirkwood is also a threat, and the Gundabad orcs lurking in those northwestern mountains that you can see in that photo there.
Nice.
Difficult start for Dale, as reflected in the campaign challenge seen on the bottom there. As touched on, the starting difficulty is pretty challenging, pretty difficult. I'm sure there's people out there that have absolutely bossed it, and it will be one of the factions that I'm going to cover in more depth with a proper breakdown of a faction guide. The overall ranking that I've given Dale personally out of 10 is a 7.5. Played it safe there, I'm not going to lie. As I say, I don't have a full in-depth dive into their campaign so far. For veterans, probably great. For rookies, although it may look appealing, maybe just be vigilant if you're diving into a campaign with Dale. Rohan. So we're moving along to the second of the Northman factions, and the second of the official factions within the base mod.
And Rohan will answer. Muster the Rhurim!
The leaders and the generals that we get with Rohan is King Theoden, of course. As you can see, he's looking a bit grey, he's looking a bit withered. I'm pretty sure that we can get that tweaked up as we go through the technology tree. As your starting general, pretty sure you have Theodred as well, which is King Theoden's son. Faction strengths, exceptional cavalry, especially mid to late game. Fast mobile armies, ideal for flanking. Strong early game momentum and good synergy with Gondor.
Gondor. Where was Gondor when the Westfall fell?
As you see in my faction guide, there is a brilliant opportunity for trade relationships straight off the bat. Faction weaknesses. Weak early infantry, vulnerable to mass arch and pikes. Large open territory to defend and plenty of threats to defend it from. And the economy can be fragile early on. Weak early infantry I will have to evaluate because once again it said that the militia units were pretty spongy for Gondor. I didn't find that to be the case. The larger open territory to defend is a bit of a pain and there are a lot of threats there. And we have Isengard to the northwest, we have the Dawnless raidings from the west itself, Mordor and Harad pressuring Gondor, which can also of course drag Rohan in. I ended up sending about a 15 unit army into Rohan just to support them with Isengard and everything that was happening there. The starting difficulty I would say it's hard. The campaign challenge on here says it's moderate or normal, but I would actually say Rohan's a tricky start. If you're well versed with Total War strategy games, maybe it'll be a walk in the park for you, but I would say it's pretty tricky. It's attacked frequently by Isengard and Dawnless and requires fast responses and cavalry focused play to survive the early pressure. So if you like your cav, Rohan's pretty good. It'll be good for you. Overall ranking, I'd give Rohan an 8 or an 8.5, purely because I feel once you deal with that early threat, they're in a better position than Dale. They have less enemies on all sides, and their units, once you get to mid-late campaign, will really start to hold together. Next along in our mighty quest of the Total War Dawnless Days factions is Gondor. If you haven't seen already, I've already done a faction guide for Gondor. It does only cover the first 5 turns, so it is pretty basic in terms of depth, but it does give you a rundown of the faction, the ins and outs, some tips, some hints that have helped me. If you want to check that out, I'll put it somewhere on the screen now. Rolling on to Gondor, just quickly running through for the people who haven't seen that video. The leaders and the generals, you start off with Denethor, obviously, as you see him on screen now. You also get Boromir. And Faramir as starting generals, or starting members of the power chain / faction family tree. The strengths, obviously brilliant roster, brilliant units. The most elite units are covered in the video I've already done. A lot of versatility. They get a brilliant defending bonus as well as some other bits and bobs. And they've got a powerful economy that you have to basically just pump up in the early turns. Strong synergy with Rohan. As I say, with Rohan they've got strong synergy with Gondor. It's the exact same with this. Absolutely graft those trade agreements, and before you know it, you're making a good chunk of pee from that. And the weaknesses, the large territory is a bit of a pain. The Corsairs are going to come and hit you from the south. We'll go into that a little bit later. It's kind of reliant on allies to
keep your borders secure, so if Rohan is to fall to Isengard, which is so critical as to why it doesn't.
The nearby threats is pretty damn obvious. You have Mordor just to the east. You've got the Corsairs coming up and smashing your cities on the southern coast. Harad also from the south, pain in the backside. Starting difficulty, as the campaign challenge says here, is hard, and I would tend to agree. It's very important to capture Minas Morgul early game, bottleneck those mountains into Mordor, and stop the stream of constant orcs flooding through. My overall ranking for Gondor, I'm a little bit biased here of course, but I would give them an 8.5 to a 9. If you can withhold the early game scrambles, you can really do a lot of damage when you're beginning that counter attack and you're pushing out with a lot of those strong units.
If you can prop up Rohan, you're defended from the north, and if you strike up that alliance with the Drudain, you're protected from the west as well.
So you only have to fight on 2 fronts, and Gondor is more than equipped in my opinion to do so. The next faction we're rolling on to is the Woodland Realm. Thranduil being the faction leader. Generals you're looking at is Legolas. Iconic, to be honest, both of them.
Faction strengths, exceptional archers, arguably the best in the whole game. Strong stealth, ambush potential, and elite late game infantry.
They're a bit glass cannon, they're a bit ropey when exposed to prolonged melee combat. The faction weaknesses, small unit sizes, expensive elite troops, limited cavalry, and can be overwhelmed by massed orcs if outnumbered. So I think the biggest threat for the Woodland Realm as a faction is
to the east, to the west, sorry, you have the goblins. To the north, you have Gundabad. To the south, you have Dog-Guldur. And then to the southeast, you have some of the factions that are not friendly with Dale.
And presumably, you will side up with Erebor and Dale in the early game just for a bit of border security. Starting difficulty, the game says very hard. I would say hard. Be prepared to get nice and snug with Erebor and with Dale, and then get yourself bogged down and bedded in for some proper extended fights with various orc factions. Overall ranking, I would give Thranduil and the Woodland Realm an 8 out of 10. Moving on to Erebor. We have Dane, the second Ironfoot, as the faction leader, another original Dawnless Days faction. Thorin the third Stonehelm is one of your starting generals. Faction strengths: extremely strong heavy infantry and elite late game units. High armour, high morale, excellent defensive capability. Strong economy once mines and trade routes develop. Natural synergy with Dale and the Iron Hills. Absolute pain when fighting the dwarves. Very, very hardy, very rigid, exactly as you'd expect them to be. Some of the faction weaknesses:
Slow movement and low mobility, expensive units and high recruitment costs, vulnerable to being surrounded by faster factions and limited cavalry, of course.
campaign challenges normal. I would tend to agree. If you can deal with the Northern Orcs pretty quickly, and then campaign down through the Misty Mountains to Moria. That's what a friend of mine did, Cam Chong. I'll pop his channel here for you.
He actually conquered up through the mountains down to Moria.
Recaptured Moria in the name of the dwarves. So that was pretty interesting to see, and of course pretty entertaining as well. The nearby threats, obviously we've covered a couple of them already. We've got Gundabad, the Orcs of the north, Dogaldor through Mirkwood, and then you also have some factions to the east that aren't friendly either. Bit of a pain in the backside. Not as tricky as Dale, but tricky. Starting difficulty is as normal. Strong defensive start, but can be pressured and requires careful expansion and coordination with Dale. Dale and the Woodland Realm is all I would add there. Try and bring that into that trio alliance. All of you will be stronger together. Overall ranking, yet again, there's another 8.5 coming in, perhaps bumped up to a 9. The faction is great. They are so tanky. Big fan of Erebor. Next on the list is the iconic man himself. Kicking off, we do have Isengard. Obviously Saruman is the faction leader and one of the generals you can bring out. The secondary general after him is Ugluk, who's, as you can imagine, an Uruk-hai, but I know you can recruit Lurtz and some of those other very iconic Uruk-hai from the films as well.
The faction strengths: they are strong, aggressive Uruk-hai infantry. Aggressive, excellent early to mid-game rush potential, access to warg riders and siege units, and central position for rapid expansion. Not to mention you are expanding into
very shoddily protected Rohan. You can rip through a lot of those troops, especially if you're going up against a lot of cavalry. Faction weaknesses: surrounded by enemies. I don't think there's a way that you can switch sides and go with the goodies. I will perhaps test that out when I go deeper into the faction breakdown for Isengard. Limited elite roster compared to late game men factions and elven factions. The economy can be fragile without early conquests. There is a special trait that you can use as Isengard where you can rapidly expand the growth within Isengard itself. Vulnerable if Rohan and Gondor coordinate, which is exactly, yet again, what I tried to do in my campaign there. The nearby threats is pretty obvious. You have Rohan, Dunland, which is sometimes an ally, sometimes a rival. Gondor, indirectly through Rohan, but if they're supporting the war effort, they're definitely a threat. Starting difficulty says normal. I would agree with that. If you can really get your skates on with your growth and prioritise cash and food, as well as a troop recruitment building, you're well on your way with Isengard. Rohan is there for the taking. As long as you get that fast aggression and early map control, you're off to a good start with Isengard. So I give them a strong ranking of a 9. If you get that early building graft done in Isengard itself, then you're well on your way to a strong campaign with this faction. Next on the list is this spiky helmeted king. Nah, not king, Dark Lord. But yeah, this iconic chap here, Sauron and Mordor. The leaders themselves are Sauron, and the starting general is the Witch King of Angmar. So some of the greatest generals that you can start off with in this game.
This is my power.
Obviously you've got this enormous mountain range around your starting area with 2 kind of bottlenecked entry points. Absolutely fantastic starting point.
Faction strengths: massive recruitment pool, overwhelming numbers, strong late game elites, Blackguard, the Nazgul units, trolls, excellent siege capability. Central position for multi-direction expansion. Obviously Gondor and Minas Tirith just to the west, and then to the northwest, we have Rohan. Nearby threats, we've pretty much just covered those.
Harad, if relations sour, they're the guys to the south that you can potentially expand into.
Starting difficulty, easy to moderate.
I would plonk that straight in easy for some of the reasons that we've already discussed, not to mention the fact that your generals are the DB.
The bee's knees, the absolute creme de la creme.
Rarely invaded early and instead ends up being the aggressor. The challenge comes from managing multiple fronts once the war begins, because once you do expand and start holding that territory, everyone's coming for you.
But you're normally strong enough to fight that off. So great ranking for Mordor. I would probably give them a 9.5, if not a 10 out of 10. Perfect beginner faction, especially if you're wanting to play one of the baddies there. The next faction is the Lostladen tribes, or Harad, as they are known, Rhun. And we have our faction leader, Shuldan the Black Serpent, and
You will normally have some form of a Harad captain or some kind of serpent guard as your next general down there.
the faction strength, strong mid to late game infantry and elite serpent guard, access to Mummerkill, giving an unmatched shock potential, good cavalry and skirmishers, and strong economy with coastal trade routes. So
As you can imagine, you start pushing this map out a little bit, and before you know it, you can very quickly control this big chunk, this big southern part of the map here.
great starting faction, and great starting area. Faction weaknesses: early infantry is mediocre. Mummerkill are powerful but expensive and vulnerable to missiles.
Long borders, yes, lots of area to defend, but like I say, swing some trade deals, you're pretty cushy.
Nearby threats: Gondor, obviously. Corsairs, if you choose to not be chummy with them, I would be chummy with them. Be diplomatic. Figure out what works for you. Figure out where you want to go and where you want to expand, and then crack on. Starting difficulty is moderate. It says hard on the campaign challenge here, but I would give it a moderate.
It really only goes to pot if your diplomacy breaks down with the factions that are around you,
You can normally offer out some nice bribes, or charge straight forth into Gondor.
and really get that support from all of the negative sides of the War of the Ring.
Another pretty strong start, another easy start. I would probably give the Lostladen tribes / Harad a 9 out of 10. And last, but by no means least, we've got the Rhurim. These are the prominent Easterling faction in the game. Faction leader is Kahar, and you normally have another Rhurim war captain as your secondary general there. The faction strengths are strong, light to medium cavalry.
Fast mobile armies, ideal for raids. Good early game pressure potential and low cost units allow a lot of wide recruitment, so you can field multiple armies on these fronts.
As my campaign is Dale, these guys actually sailed over this lake and started terrorising the southern Dale lands, which was a real pain. The faction weaknesses:
Weak armor, poor staying power, limited elite units, vulnerable to heavy infantry and massed archers, and the economy depends on expansion.
once again, as the Rhurim, if you really want to sustain these big armies, these big costly armies, you do have to expand. Nearby threats: Rhun to the north is a dominant regional power, but you can win some battles there and very quickly take all that territory for yourself. Harad, further south, as we say, Rhun and the Lostladen tribes, they could be a bit of a threat. It says the campaign challenge is hard. I wouldn't actually agree with this. I'd put it more moderate, just because of the limited amount of early game threats that you're actually going to face.
But you must expand as fast as possible, so not to get left behind by your kind of big brothers in the area.
So the overall ranking I'd give them is probably an 8.5, yet again, just for the security and safety that they've got at the start of the early game. So that's pretty much it, ladies and gents. That's pretty much all the factions for the base game themselves.
I'm going to be doing a video which covers faction 10 to 28, which is other little factions that are available in the All Factions Unlocked submod.
Factions like the Anduin Vale, Balchoth, the Northern Oricani,
Drudane, the Corsairs, Harondor.
factions much like that. So if you're interested in seeing a lot of these smaller, minor factions, ones that we can see here, please be sure to drop a like, drop a subscribe, drop a comment. All the interaction works absolute wonders. Yeah, stick around. We'll be back. We'll be back for another one. Whether I'm going to be able to get this out before the new year, I don't know. But I'm going to say Happy New Year, and I'm going to hope that I can get this video published before the new year. Have a great one, guys. All the love, all the joy, and I will speak to you all very soon.